I am Lossaso. I'm going to be delivering to you the lecture on the Red Scare, the Lavender Scare, and domestic contagion. So in short, that means for the next 45 minutes, your eyes are mine. I want them up here on me the whole time. Thank you. So without further ado, let's dig into the nitty-gritty of the Cold War fear-mongering witch hunts that dominated the 1950s and continue to color our perception of all things, from home life to families to, well, let's just get into it. Now to start, first off, does everyone here know what the Cold War was? Everyone have a general knowledge of the fact that we were basically in one giant staring contest with the Soviet Union for about 50 years. Everyone aware of that? Okay, good. So, the question begs, well, hold on, what's going on? We're at war, not quite at war with the Soviet Union, but at the same time, we are so scared of communism infecting our society. Why? Anyone want to wager an answer? Come on, I'm not going to bite.
The values are opposite of ours.
Bingo, hit the nail on the head, air five. Exactly, the values are opposite of ours. They believe in a non-capitalist society. The whole backbone of American institutions is capitalism. They, at least in some forms, do not believe that having organized religious faith, religious freedom is a key part of American institutions. Classless societies. America is built on a class system. They just see the antithesis to what is and what are our American values here. So for that reason, we have had a history of hating communists and Reds, as they are called, ever since the end of the 1800s. And we have had a number of scares, including one right after World War I that resulted in the lynchings, beatings, arrests of hundreds of communists, as well as the general no, not welcome to the Communist Party in the United States for a long time. In fact, during the 1930s, we had three Senate investigations committees aimed to weed out communist influence in the United States during the Great Depression. The most famous, the House of Un-American Activities, was created in 1937 for this reason, and although they were meant to investigate all groups that were deemed un-American, they focused, of course, on communists. They flirted with investigating the KKK in the 40s, but in the end they didn't, concluding that the KKK is one of America's oldest institutions. So, very American. So, what I'm saying, pretty much, is that we have had a history of hating communism before the end of World War II. After World War II, when we began to challenge the Soviet Union in the international arena, we began to fear of communist influence in the home arena, that the Soviet Union had already begun influencing people in our government, in business, and is going to undermine us from the inside. Because of this, we've got to be careful. We've got to take measures to make sure Soviet infiltration does not happen. For this reason, President Harry S. Truman in 1947 signed an executive order creating the Federal Employee Loyalty Program. Under this program, the board investigated federal employees of suspected treason or disloyalty. He did this only 2 weeks after signing his Truman Doctrine that basically put the United States as the world police. And to be fair, espionage was a real concern. The classified Soviet documents suggest that there were a group of federal officials and employees who were working in the government in the 1930s and early 40s. However, this loyalty board sucked at finding them. It did not uncover a single verifiable case of espionage, and instead focused its attention on people who spoke dissenting views on political and social issues, with the board ultimately firing 378 officials from their jobs for their political and personal beliefs. And if you were fired because of this, then you are up Schitt's Creek, my friend. You are never going to get another job working in any branch of government, any type of work that has to do with government work, and largely, if the reason for your firing was release, not in many other industries either. This was a black mark on your record. And they could fire you if you didn't answer questions like, do you believe in integration, or do you listen to the records of Paul Robeson? Anyone know who Paul Robeson is? No, I don't expect you to.
Musician?
You got it, he's a musician. Yeah, he was a pretty popular African-American singer and actor in the 1930s and 40s, but also a communist. So you listen to his records, you were red, you're fired. And this thing started getting traction in the late 40s, but really came to light was the House of Un-American Activities public hearings on communist infiltration of Hollywood. In other words, the members of the House of American Activities Committee went to Hollywood. They brought a lot of writers, directors, actors, and people in front of them and asked them point blank, are you a member of the Communist Party? Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Do you have any communist affiliations? And such. And mind you, there were a good number of communists in Hollywood at this time, because communism was seen as a popular alternative during the very dark times of the Great Depression. And then when you have this whole view of a classless society where everyone is equal, and look at the Soviet Union where everyone seems to have a job at that time, some people joined it. And screenwriters coming from the liberal views of Broadway were flirted with it, but mostly did not join it. But these hearings didn't really find much communist infiltration. What they found were a couple of very hard-minded screenwriters and die-hard liberals, not communists, whom were chastised publicly, because these were all recorded and written about, and then sent to jail. The Hollywood 10 included 8 screenwriters, 1 director, and 1 producer, who were all sent to prison for failure to answer questions. Then you also had another group, who were the people who publicly gave testimony on their knowledge of communist activities in Hollywood. They included actor Gary Cooper, Walt Disney, and Ronald Reagan, who at this time was not only an actor, but the president of the Screen Actors Guild, who not only gave testimony, but later gave as many names of people that he could to the committee and to the FBI, so that way they could arrest them or blacklist them. Blacklisting is basically, if you're found to have communist ties, then you cannot work in Hollywood. You cannot get a job from any studio, be in any picture, anything. One screenwriter said that after a year of being blacklisted, he got a job as a maitre d' for $75 a week. And he used to be making $1,000 a week. Yeah, and it's also, while looking through possible names of communists, that Ronald Reagan found his second wife, Nancy Davis, whose name came up as a possible communist, but he said, no, don't worry about her, she's cute. Outside of Hollywood, there were also several other high-profile cases. 1948, Alger Hiss. Does that name ring a bell to anyone? No? Well, didn't expect it to. This was a long time ago. He was a former government official accused of passing classified information to Soviet spy Whittaker Chambers, who later disowned communism and became one of the primary anti-communist speakers of the nation, and did have to serve a day in prison for actually passing along classified information to Soviet intelligence. Alger Hiss said he was innocent, found guilty, although later showed they weren't guilty. But the other 12 prosecuted under the Truman administration, who were members of the Communist Party, didn't do anything with the Soviet Union, but still said to violate the Smith Act, prohibited advocating the overthrow of the U.S. government. But the most infamous case was in 1950, when Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, husband and wife, nuclear physicists, were put to death for passing secrets of the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union. They were sentenced to death for disloyalty. It also changed politics, the Red Scare, because by 1950, both political parties were competing over who was tougher on communism. The Republicans seemed to win that one because in 1950, the previous year, China fell into a communist government, and in 1950, we got embroiled in the Korean War to stop the flow of communism, but we weren't winning. And who was in office in 1950? Who said Democrats? You're right. And now everyone together. Democrats. That's right. So the Democrats got labeled as being soft on communism, no more so by this lovely gentleman right here, Joseph McCarthy, the face of the Red Scare. And one of its primary propagators. Now, he was a senator from Wisconsin, elected in 1948, and he harassed current and former government officials and employees who he said collaborated with the commies. In 1950, he gave a speech in West Virginia, which he claimed to have a list of names of 205 men known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party and who nevertheless are still working and shaping the policy of the State Department. Now, the number of names on this list always kept changing. First it was 205, then it was 87, then it was 57, and his charges also went from being communist to loyalty risks to security risks. But all the same, the charges gave him fame, as shown in this cover on Time magazine. So he and his chief counsel, Roy Cohn, who was the prosecutor who got the Rosenbergs the death sentence. He was the guy who charged them with espionage and who said that they deserved death. He was now McCarthy's partner in crime. And together they bullied and badgered witnesses, often hurling accusations so complex and quickly that witnesses couldn't quite answer them easily. Yes?
Do you know when this was published, like this?
This issue? I believe this was 1951, 52. Yeah, I think 52. And because of this, hundreds of people suffered public humiliation, were fired, some were even sent to jail. And this did more so in spreading the fear outside of government to the public. You had witch hunts for communists at universities, in businesses, even in small towns. If your local librarian was talking about how she feels that all people of all races should be able to come in and check out books, then she could be fired as a possible communist. Yeah. You had some people who were literally chased out of the neighborhood. Some people that were scared away and intimidated to leave their job or leave their town because of perceived communist symptoms. It was wide-ranging, and McCarthy did a lot to publicize this fear. However, he finally went too far in 1954 after accusing the American Army of harboring communists at bases in New Jersey. McCarthy Senate committee conducted hearings on this, which were the first to be broadcast on live television. And this was the first time that American viewers actually saw McCarthy in action and saw, geez, this guy is a slob. They saw him hurling accusations crazily at people that made really no sense, while at the same time, while he was being questioned, he was burping, picking his nose, sweating, and you were just like, what? This is who we're listening to? no. And by the end of those hearings, the people had had enough, with an exasperating witness bursting out, "Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last? Have you left no sense of decency?" After the hearings, the Senate voted to censure McCarthy. In other words, sit down and shut up. And he died 2.5 years later from alcoholism. Fitting end, I guess. But like I said, although he was the public face of communism, the movement was much wider than him. Any questions? No? Okay, good. And it was also these anxieties, these fears, that fed into the second major witch hunt of the era, the Lavender Scare, happening concurrently with the Red Scare, and thusly named after, this was a question I heard, why the Lavender Scare? Well, it comes from Senator Everett Dickerson, who claimed getting into office that he's gonna oust all the lavender lads from the State Department. And we'll continue to use that term. Lavender lads being a way of saying homosexuals. But no one wanted to use that word. So, how did this start? Well, again, it started with McCarthy and Cohn. Cohn's the guy on the left. New York lawyer, prosecutor of the Rosenberg case, McCarthy's chief counsel, then afterward, a lawyer and advisor to such officials as Roger Stone, Rupert Murdoch, and Donald Trump. He was Trump's personal lawyer and mentor. So, 2 weeks after McCarthy's famous West Virginia speech, he makes the case that the State Department is harboring security risks. Not communists, but homosexuals who are going to undermine the nation. The Secretary of State denies this, but when cross-examined in the House, he admits that the State Department did recently fire 202 security risks, 91 of which for homosexual activities, and this lights the fire. Pretty soon, inquiries were coming in. Letters being written by the thousands about, oh my gosh, is our government really littered with homosexuals? Is this true? This is crazy. This is unseemly. How could this be? Well, why does this matter? Why does it matter that there are homosexuals working in the government? Well, I'm sorry?
Because they give you blackmail. Like,
Air 5. You got it right there. That was the argument from McCarthy and Cohn and other people on Capitol Hill. They were all saying homosexuals, they're trying to hide within their life. They don't want to be found out. And if they are found out by Soviet agents, they'll be very easy to blackmail despite the Soviet Union. And they drew parallels between communists and homosexuals. A lexicon associations, like they were both hidden subcultures, they both met in shady places, communicated through scandalous literature and bonds of loyalty, both challenged traditional norms of society, and both associated with psychologically inclined illness. And all this came to a head with the Hoey Committee report. It was a Senate subcommittee led by Senator Clyde Hoey that claimed that after over a year of research, the State Department was overrun with sex perverts. Those were their words. They related homosexuals as security risks due to the thought that they were easy to blackmail and made into spies, that they were cut from the same cloth as communists, that they could be disloyal, easily manipulated, and of weak character. But they said all this despite not having a single example. Oh, no, sorry, they did have one example. They And that was this guy, Colonel Riddle, a colonel in the Austrian army before and during World War I. And when was World War I, everyone? Who remembers the years?
1914 to 19.
There we go, 1914 is when it started, and this was 1950, this was taking place. That's over 36 years ago, and this was their one case of a homosexual who was blackmailed into spying against his country. Well, he wasn't blackmailed, he was bribed. He was bribed. He was spying for the Soviets, but the Soviets were paying, the Russians, not Soviet Union at this time, the Russians were paying him hundreds of thousands to spy for them. He did it willingly, he wasn't blackmailed for it. But this was their one example. And this was apparently all they needed. And honestly, if you look at it, the whole thing was kind of an oxymoron. Because the government won't accept homosexuals, so homosexuals are susceptible to spying in order to keep their secret. They're easy to blackmail for this reason. However, if the government does not care about sexual orientation, then there would be no risk. Because, okay, I'm homosexual. Well, I'm going to blackmail you for that information. But my employer doesn't care, so what? So in a sense, it was just giving themselves ammunition to go after the homosexual community. State Department subsequently fired about 600 employees on so-called morals charges by the end of 1950, but by this time, the charges of homosexuality had begun to permeate beyond the government and into public life. As we can see here, with such colorful cartoons in main Washington newspapers. Vote to investigate perversion. And then I love that one on the left, President Truman. So newspapers, they were full of reports of what was going on, new investigations into homosexuals in government and into communities. You had tabloids at this time running exposés of homosexual lifestyles, with Lake and Mortimer publishing their famed piece on the homosexual community in Washington, D.C., and the tabloid Washington Confidential, in which he wrote that Washington was a whole nest of appeasers, left-wingers, welfare staters, do-gooders, and queer intellectuals. Now hold on. Look at the things they say before queer. Appeasers, left-wingers, welfare staters, do-gooders. In other words, liberals. So right here, we see the beginning of a linking with homosexuality to a liberal perspective. Pretty soon, tabloids, politicians, and other people in publications began to associate the leftist, liberal, New Dealer politicians and officials with homosexuals, saying they were dainty, well-dressed, weak. Homosexuality had long been associated with some weak male, and now they were taking those qualities and putting them on to liberal politicians in the early 50s, as was the biggest case in the 1952 presidential election between Dwight Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson II. Eisenhower, Republican; Stevenson, a Democrat. Now, Stevenson had been in politics for years. He was a great speaker, very charismatic, but he was divorced and unmarried during the time of the election, and during which the tabloids jumped on a rumor that Stevenson was arrested on morals charges. With such publications as Confidential, the National Enquirer of the 1950s, writing up a huge piece on how that Stevenson rumor started. And just so you know, morals charge is basically you were caught with your pants down with another man. Now this wasn't true. In fact, the whole rumor was leaked by Janet Hoover to help put more support for Eisenhower. But it stuck. Beyond this, Stevenson was drawn as a weak egghead with a fruity voice, kind of man that you needed to get out of Washington, not send there. It was the weak-willed, egg-headed, dainty-dressed intellectuals that came into the New Deal who did not stop the rise of communism and is now going to get infectination. We need a new class of strong-willed, masculine, God-fearing men to run the government. And that is what Eisenhower and his Vice President Richard Nixon were going to deliver. And their campaign was catered to this whole notion. Look at some of these campaign ads. They're God-fearing men. A vote for Ike and Dick is a vote for morality. Also the nickname, Ike and Dick. They were, regular guys. They weren't high-minded intellectuals. They were just regular guys you want to sit back, have a beer with. And they were married. Their campaign made a big deal out of their wives, Mamie and Pat. Mamie for First Lady. And most of all, they were going to come in and they were going to clean house. What does that mean? Someone say something? Clean house?
See, get all the communists out, further investigation of what was already going on. So, yeah.
Yeah, you got it. Get the communists, but also. Yeah, sorry. Let's remind me. Get the communists and the security risks out of government. And that's just what they did because, of course, they won. Eisenhower was president from 1952 to 1960, and when he got into office, he signed Executive Order 10450. This basically made homosexuality a fireable offense and a reason to not hire anyone in any position in government. Also set up security division to investigate possible homosexuals. And this basically gave the Loyalty Commission free rein to investigate and fire anyone suspected of homosexual activity. It's estimated that over 5,000 people lost their jobs in the government, the military, or government contract work. This is where the ban on homosexuals in the military came from. Came from this. It stayed in effect for over 40 years, until 1995 when Clinton wrote in the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which removed it or replaced it with, of course, Don't Ask, Don't Tell for homosexual. Then Obama's one who completely repealed it. It was also the Obama administration that issued an apology to all those affected by the Lavender scare. And time permitting, yes, I want you to watch a little video of one of the victims of the scare.
Sweeping through the place and knocking everybody out. Every one of the women. They pulled them out of bed in the middle of the night and set them up with lights, brilliant lights in their faces, and started questioning them about their sex life and whether they were gay and and it was by association. But you went to dinner all the time with, well, yeah, that was the chow hall. We went to dinner, yeah, well, she was gay, so we know you are. They said to them, we have your friend in the next room. She's already told us that you're gay. So you might as well give us the names of others. You give us the names of others and we'll go easier on you. And These were kids. They were going to discharge them, and we heard that they also sent letters home telling their parents why they were being discharged, so that they would not be able to go home and just fold themselves back into family life. And in their little towns where that word spread like wildfire, and I am close to tears thinking about it. Because that's what I thought then. What's going to happen to them? And if they did that to me, how would I ever face my family?
And this wasn't just in the government this was happening. It was happening in the wider communities as well. A little bit of background. A lot of cities have been points of transport for military men during the war. San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, places where they'd be shipped out to the Pacific or European theater. They later became centers of a thriving homosexual community after the war, because this is where many who were in the military, homosexuals were a sizable portion of the U.S. military during the time. This is where they stayed before being shipped out. This is where they met others for the first time, who were also gay. And this is where they went to settle after the war. But now, there was a much tougher stance taken on immorality laws across the nation, spurred in part by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who told American Magazine the sex offender has replaced the kidnapper as a threat to the peace of mind of the parents of America. He blamed the problem on social and family upheavals of World War II, and that the wartime spirit of abandon anything goes led to a decline of morals among people of all ages. Now there was a need for tougher laws. And with Garcia and Cohen working the security risk angle on Capitol Hill, they got it. With the Miller Sexual Psychopaths Law, which increased the punishments for homosexual activity, because it was a punishable offense if you were caught. This stiffened the sentence against you and basically gave police a free rein to go and basically bust in the doors of gay bars, to harass individuals in public parks, to have spies all around. In fact, Fred Otash, a member of the LAPD in the 50s, later a private investigator, confirmer for Confidential magazine, said that he and his buddies, who were in the public morals division, would drill holes into public bathrooms of parks that were said to be meetup places for homosexuals, and then they peek in, see if anything was happening. Pretty sick, right? And the press was all for this. The press was integral in conflating this whole notion of sexual perversion with sexual psychopathy. In other words, homosexuals were equated to child rapists. They were predators whose sole mission was to find, seduce, and basically rape your son, your brother, your cousin. Popular magazine asserted in 1950 that once a man assumes the role of homosexual, he often throws off all moral restraints. Some male sex deviants do not stop with infected. There are often innocent partners. They descend to perversions, to other forms of depravity, such as drug addiction, burglary, sadism, and even murder. Okay, second time. I can't show you the video, but I know Jason will send it all out to you later. It's a nice little PSA video that basically shows this nice guy who gives young Jimmy a lift home is actually a homosexual whose sole intent is to corrupt Jimmy with seductive pictures taken back to his house for playtime. And hold on, it's gonna get even crazier. because this found a venue in other forms of popular culture, like comic books. It was Frederick Werth's groundbreaking work, Seduction of the Innocent, 1954, said that comic books were corrupting the nation's youth, making them all criminals, juvenile delinquents, and homosexuals. It claimed that Wonder Woman was a lesbian and bondage aficionado, and that Batman and Robin were gay lovers. Here's a passage from the text. They are Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson. Bruce Wayne is described as a socialite, and the official relationship is that Dick is Bruce's ward. They live in sumptuous quarters with beautiful flowers and large vases and have a butler, Alfred. Batman is sometimes shown in a dressing gown. As they sit by the fireplace, the young boy sometimes worries about his partner. Something wrong with Bruce? He hasn't been himself these past few days. It is like a wish dream of two homosexuals living together. Sometimes they are shown on a couch, with Bruce reclining, Dick sitting next to him, jacket off, collar open, and his hand on his friend's arm. Like the girls in other stories, Robin is sometimes held captive by the villains. Batman has to give in, or Robin gets killed. And here are some panels that they cited as evidence of this. Them on a boat ride together. Them sleeping in the same bedroom. This actually led to a lot of hoopla. There was a congressional investigation into the comic book industry after this. And this led to the Comics Code Authority, which was basically the comics' own censorship rules, which banned drug use, homosexuality, explicit violence, nudity, and other things from the comic book industry, and stayed in effect from 1955 until 2002. I mean, it kind of lost its power in the 70s, but still lasted for that long. And beyond all that, all this hatred of homosexuality was also because it was a classified mental disease at the time. In the late 1940s, homosexuality was officially declared a mental disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And the Miller sexual psychopaths laws that I just said, that calls for the treatment of sexual psychopaths, allowed people who acted on same-sex impulses to be arrested and classified as mentally insane. And homosexuality was still labeled as a mental illness until 1974. So now, I've talked to you about the Red Scare. I've talked to you about the Lavender Scare. How it spread this whole atmosphere of fear throughout the United States. But it also had another effect. And that was basically Kennedy's idea of containment at home. It provoked a huge wave of moral conservatism across the nation that preached that the traditional family values and religion were a shield against the subversive influences of communism, which by extension included homosexuality, the nuclear family, suburban household, church-going became proper guards against communist influence, with the government going hand in hand with religious effort. I already said that. As example, the Pledge of Allegiance, 1954, at Eisenhower's urging, our pledge now added the words, under God. Yes?
Wait, back to that last, like you said, that homosexuality was using someone.
1974. I believe that's it. Yeah, so under God was added to our Pledge of Allegiance. Also, our money. 1956, Congress passed the Public Law 140, which made it mandatory that all coinage and paper currency display the motto, "In God We Trust," from 1957 onward. So, $1956, $1957. And if you look at your money today, take out your wallet, take out a dollar, you'll still see, "In God We Trust." Came out of the Red Scare. Yeah, I got a whole dollar on Red Charge now. And also, like I said, religion spiked at this time. There was a huge surge in religious revival movements across the nation. Number of Americans attending church on a weekly basis skyrocketed. 1940, 49% of Americans went to church. 1950, 55% of Americans. 1959, 69% of Americans attended church weekly. Reverend Billy Graham. Has anyone heard of Billy Graham?
Yes.
Yes. Good. His revival movement really kicked into gear at this time, and he said in 1950s, if you would be a true patriot, then become a Christian. If you would be a loyal American, then become a loyal Christian. He also had TV shows like New York Bishop Fulton J. Sheen's Life is Worth Living, where he explicitly tied the moral uplift of the Bible to combating the evils of communism. The show lasted throughout the 50s and into the 60s. And the 1955 TV address. Without God, there could be no American form of government, nor an American way of life. Recognition of a supreme being is the first and the most basic expansion of Americanism. But outside of religion, the home became, yes?
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Became a shelter of Americanism. The media pushed images of the nuclear family with the traditional roles of husband and wife, husband going off to work, the wife staying in the home, raising the kids, making sure that all the husband's needs were satisfied. Because if the husband is happy, then he will not be influenced by the seductions that communism and immorality can offer. Thus, the wife has to make sure that his husband is satisfied always, and that the children are taught proper lessons of being a good American citizen. But not over-smother them with love, because they need to be raised to be strong American boys and girls, and be taught the traditional roles of life. The girls grow up to be good housewives, the boys go work in a business where they can work their way up and afford a nice home in the suburbs like they have. And this dominated the media. Turn on the TV, there were shows like Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, Dennis the Menace, many others. These types of shows showing the stable nuclear family that's sprout in suburbia or dominate American TV screens and enforce the values of the nuclear family, the separation of gender roles, and the proper means of parenting. And I've got to put the end the lesson that is an episode of Leave It to Beaver about, well...
Okay, that's funny. That's funny. Well, whenever we cook inside, Mom always says to cook it. But whenever we cook outside, you always do it. How come?
Well, it's sort of traditional, I guess. You know, they say a woman's place is in the home, and I suppose as long as she's in the home, she might as well be in the kitchen.
Oh. That explains about Mom. Then how come you always do the outside cooking?
Well, I'll tell you, son, women do all right when they have all the modern conveniences. But us men,